Okay. So what we were just talking about is the mistakes that people tend to make on the CV. My background is a career coach. When I was living in the UK, my main role was a career coach, and I was working with young people. And what I quickly realised is when I started working with the executive level, is that there really wasn't much difference between the way that the kids were creating a CV or a resume to what actually adults were doing. That's quite scary. Don't know what you think, but I thought it was quite scary. But it also made me quite happy in some senses because I thought, do you know what? I can do this job. But what I'm trying to say to you is that you need to be looking at your CV in a different way. So I think the problem is that we're not taught on how to do this. And often the case is that we don't realize what the real goal of it is. And the real goal, if you want to ask yourself the question, is does my CV get me to a coffee stage or an interview? And if it's not doing any of those things, then the CV is not fit for purpose, and it needs to be looked at and it needs to be changed. And that's ultimately what you need to be thinking about from the get-go. Yeah. And there are some common mistakes that most people will make when creating a CV. And as I said to you, when I was in Liverpool, I was that career coach that was working with those young people. I then moved to London and I was working with, executive level people of director level that wanted to go and get that next role. And the things that they didn't recognize is the fact is that you're a service. And because you're ultimately a service, they can't try you out. So what I'm trying to say to you is that they can't go, oh, let's hire, I don't know, Steve or Sean today, or Mike, yeah, because it's going to cost them a lot of money. So the only way that they can evaluate you is based on what you put out there. So think about what I'm saying. The only way that they can evaluate you is based on what you put out there. But that's good news because you're in control of that. And most people don't recognize that. Your LinkedIn profile, you are in control of this. Your CV, you are in control of this. But what I keep on seeing is the fact that people either don't want to, spend the time on it, or they ultimately don't know what they're doing. And so they do the DIY approach. And it's costly because you're gambling maybe a 70k job on your take on what you think is a good CV. In a nutshell, okay? So the higher up the level that you go, the more thought and attention that needs to take place because those jobs aren't easy to find. And if you're using a CV that's just got you by, it's probably no longer enough. Not probably now, yeah, when there's so many people that are going to be laid off or are laid off with the current climate. So what do you need to be thinking about? Well, I would say to you that you need to be thinking about getting it professionally done. But I would say that because I'm ultimately a business. So I'm going to put that aside for a second, and I'm going to give you real concrete tips in terms of what you could be doing to improve your CV. And I'm actually going to show you a CV that I don't like. And I'm just going to explain why I don't like it as well. So we're actually going to have a real practical example of where I go through this. And I have actually, I don't know if anybody can see the chat box, but what I've also done is I've said that one of my big things is that you should have two CVs. One that is user friendly. It's good for those job sites, or if you attach it to a company site. And one that you can send direct to the person that could hire you. So I call this one the creative CV. So in the chat box, I've mentioned that all the money goes to charity. And I'm happy to say, if you buy one, I will send you and show you that I've actually sent that all off to Global Giving. And there's a charity that I would like to give it to. So if you find, okay, during this session, that you can see the benefit of potentially having two CV types and you do want to do it yourself, then I would say, okay, that could be a good way forward. And I will explain the 2 CV types in a second. So today what I'm going to do is I've explained who I am and why I think that I'm, you know, able to say what I'm saying and be pretty rude about it. I've said to you clearly that I'm going to give you a real example of why I don't like this CV. But I've also put down a few things, probably about 5 things, of the key things that I see that you're doing wrong. And the first one, okay, the first one is very much to do with that you are not tailoring the CV to the job that you're going for. That's probably the biggest mistake that I see people doing. So let me really spell this out. You create a CV and then you send that CV off to another 50 odd companies, 20 odd companies, and it's the same CV. You've not changed it. You've not looked at the job description. You've not understood that, okay, this job is asking more about X and less on B than the other role, and therefore it needs changing. So is anybody that's going to be willing to agree, or do you all change your CV and you're all amazing? Have you, what are the feelings here? Can speak. Doesn't have to be just me speaking. And there is somebody waiting to join. Hi, Carlos. So the question I was asking was, has anybody sent over their CV where they've amended that CV to suit the job they're going for? Or do you tend to send a generic CV? Is anybody going to be willing to unmute themselves?
Yeah, I'll unmute myself for you. So so what I tend to do is have a really good job description, and tend to try and understand what are the key elements they're looking for. Because you can see that when you read the CV, you look at what they're trying to achieve, and then just try and emphasise that with a couple of words. And actually, I also try to match the words that they use.
I love that idea. That's a great idea. I actually like to do that myself. Yeah. So using the language that they use is a fantastic move to make. Thank you, Sean. That's brilliant. You know, what I like to do is if I was working on somebody's resume CV, is one of the things, if I was working with a client, is I would ask them, okay, I want to see a number of job descriptions, because ultimately I want to, it kind of goes to point number 3, is I want to re-engineer the process. I want to see what they are looking for. Yeah, ultimately, what is the common themes between those roles? But I also recognize that even though, you know, this is going to sound really strange, there's no such thing, from a career coach, I'm saying to you, there's no such thing as a perfect CV or resume, which sounds a bit ironic, but there isn't, because there does need to be some tailoring. So what I like to do is, I'm very honest with people who I work with, is to say, okay, we're going to create a CV that is close as humanly possible to what it is they're asking. However, rather than it taking you another, I don't know, day to amend this CV to be able to send it to other roles and other jobs, then if I will show you how that we can just take 20 minutes to make sure that you're tailoring that CV to the job, yeah, that they're looking for. So ultimately, that is the best way, yeah, that you need to be thinking about it. So that comes back to understanding that you're not sending a generic CV. One of the things that I actually like to do is have your name at the top, which is obvious, yeah, of the CV, but I also like to have the name of the role underneath your job, the job that's advertised in the job description. So I always say to people, insert the name of the role underneath your name, yeah. Other things where you can personalize it could be that you use page numbers. Obviously you should be doing this anyway, but you could be having, you know, on the footer or the header, the name of the company. So it looks like you've gone the extra mile, okay? But obviously still looking at the job description. It's not just about those small touches, still looking at the job description, making sure that what they're asking for, you're actually giving them, okay? So let's come down to probably a big one that I see people doing, which is all the time, is that in the summary section particularly, yeah, in the summary section, maybe just underneath your name. Sometimes people do have a summary section to introduce themselves. A lot of the times I just see key adjectives. Like, you know, how can we describe it? I'm a really great, I don't know, I'm an excellent sales professional. Yeah, maybe a bad example. Or, you know, I'm a driven executive. I mean, seriously, what do those words actually mean? So really how I like to create a CV is I look at it from the point of view that it's not just about writing the content in terms of everything of what you've done in your whole life and sticking it on this document. I like to look at a CV where it's talking about the ultimate result that you deliver. So the way that I like to see this, and it's an interesting way to look at this, is that you only get employed because ultimately they have a problem. Think about that for a second. You only get employed for that role because they have a problem. If they do not have a problem, they don't need you. You get made redundant. Yeah. So really a CV needs to be focused on the problems and the solutions that you're able to offer, and less focused on the kitchen sink about what you've done. In some senses, you could argue that a CV isn't about you, it's about them. That's kind of slightly ironic. You've still got to obviously put your work history, but ultimately, I like to think about it in a completely different way than most career coaches out there. I like to think about it that we get hired. And it's true, even voluntary organisations understand this. If they don't, you know, if you need a volunteer or you need something, there's got to be a demand. There's got to be a need for that. And if there's no need, you're not even employed as a volunteer. Okay, so to me, a CV, a resume, needs to be able to understand the pain points in some senses that this company has, and also how you're able to solve those problems. So again, a completely different way to look at things than what we've probably been told. Okay, right. So the next bit that I like to talk about is, you know, that I don't see people doing, and I kind of emphasize this at the start, is that often people are creating a CV, and again, they're not recognizing the higher that I go up this ladder, this corporate ladder, the harder those jobs are going to be for me to get. Okay, and what you again need to keep on recognizing is that your CV, your LinkedIn profile, in some senses, to me, is the minimum now. Yeah, the CV is online with the LinkedIn profile. I mean, you could argue back in the day when you and I, you know, were, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, you could say, okay, there was a newspaper, yeah, and you would circle that job, and then you would apply for that particular role. And so the CV at that point was so important. But the reality is that your LinkedIn profile is in some senses your mini CV. So in some senses, both of them need to be really on par, so they're attracting companies and people to you. But the point that I'm trying to make is that the higher that you go up this corporate ladder, the more it is that more attention that you need to be given to this, because this is like your calling card. This is how they will evaluate you. And this is what I was talking about. To me, that you need to be thinking about two different CV types. You need to be thinking about the one, which is really good for recruiters and those job sites, because they don't want you to send them a PDF. They will say to you, if you try and send a recruiter a PDF CV or a resume, they will say, can you send it to me in Word? Or they will convert it. Yeah, simple as. Because obviously they want to remove your name, etc., and your contact details, so they want to take ownership of that because they want the commission. So that's where the Word, you know, a normal Word document, a normal black and white version is great for those types of people. But if you are able to think about it another way, in terms of, okay, you could be using a creative CV, and sometimes I like to explain what I'm on about, and I'm going to point to this. Actually, do I have it up already? And then I will just share the screen. Right, just to give you an idea of when I say creative and what I'm on about by creative. For example, that could be deemed as a creative CV. any of those are creative, okay, but they're all done in Microsoft Word, for example, okay. These are great if you know that you are sending it, for example, to your future boss. Yeah, this is really good if you know, okay, I'm going to be sending this document, and I'm going to be sending this document to a person. Yeah, I know it's going to be going, I'm not uploading it to a job site, it's going direct to this person. Because the reason why I say that is because of applicant tracking software, and this CV, even though it's designed by a graphic designer, and even though it's still in Word, Microsoft Word, it's got text boxes, images, etc., etc. So the reality is that these, you know, these applicant tracking software does not like this type of CV. So I say to people, it's in your interest to maybe create 2 types of CVs. Yeah, one of them could be the creative, something like this, and one of them could be the black and white version. Okay, so hopefully, does that make sense to everybody? Any questions there?
No, it does.
Good. Okay.
I did have a question.
Oh yeah.
Kind of related to this.
Yeah.
I recently had a couple of open positions, and I had the experience of seeing how the applicants' resumes show, or they're summarized in HR applications like Workday.
Yeah.
And to your point earlier, they are, it extracts some of your capabilities and positions, and it's not really what you've written. It's an extract of that. So then I looked again at my own resume, and I was even tempted to try and apply to my own position to see how the system would filter that. Do you have any advice on how to write or kind of code so
yeah,
those
well,
filters?
I don't know about code, but the way that I would create a CV is moving away from, you know, I like to focus not on keywords. So if it's extracting information out, you know, it might be extracting information by, you could ultimately say by keywords, it's looking for certain words, and then it may be taking that information out. But the problem is that when you start putting just a series of keywords in a CV, you just ultimately look like a robot, and it doesn't really, to me, feel like you're an actual person. So what I kind of like to do if I was working with somebody is I like to, you know, rather than just, you know, pile a list of adjectives, I actually like to look at the key achievements and the things that you've actually done, and make sure that they're part of that CV, and definitely, you know, high up in that CV, because ultimately they say that, what is it, 3 or 5 seconds that you've got, you know, time to, you know, maybe not so much if it was through the applicant tracking software, but if somebody sees your CV and they all look the same, that's where the creative one stands out. But to answer your question, I would focus maybe on looking at, you know, your key achievements, but making them real. Okay, so you know, explaining, this is what I've done and this is the result of what I've done. Yeah, and having that quite high up in the CV. So, you know, that you've got somebody to see that straight away to continue that reading. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, okay. I want to share with you, you know, a CV. I'm just going to share the screen again. I'm going to share with you a CV in terms of, just found one on Google. Yeah, and the reasons why I don't like this. Yeah, in fact, I really don't like it. Okay, so it looks good. I mean, it looks nice, there's plenty of white space, okay? But what I really don't like about it is that, to me, a CV needs to be joined up with your LinkedIn profile. Nobody sees that. Yeah, but I do. Yeah, so what do I mean by that? There should be a call to action which says, connect with me on LinkedIn. And yes, that should be on your CV. Yeah, why do you want to do that? Because, well, you only do that if your LinkedIn profile is any good. If it's not, then you wouldn't do that. But that's why, to me, those documents are now so on par. And what normally is happening is that people have a CV and they have a LinkedIn profile. And what I'm trying to do is basically make sure that if you've created marketing collateral, and that's what it is, it's marketing. Basically, a CV and a LinkedIn profile is marketing, then they should be joined up to me, and there should be a clear call to action. And another great tip is, even if you're sending your CV off via email, which I would imagine that you're all going to do at some point, yeah, whether it's to a recruiter, whether it's to the hiring manager or whoever it is, on your email signature should have a strong call to action, connect with me on LinkedIn. Okay? You are wanting ultimately to drive people to where they can find out more about you. That's the way that you need to be thinking about this. Okay, so nowhere on this CV is there any mention, as far as I can see, of a LinkedIn profile. And also, I like to drive people to a LinkedIn profile where they can find out, well, LinkedIn has got, it's you can put a lot more information on there. So that's exactly what I do, is I help people to say, okay, we can, if you've got a long work history, then you could say, for a complete list of my jobs, please refer to my LinkedIn profile. Another great way that you could use LinkedIn is, I don't know if has anybody done this. Has anybody got any recommendations? Please speak to me, Steve, Sean. Don't pick on people. Anybody got any recommendations on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Okay, fantastic.
So actually,
yeah, so sometimes, why not even think about using some of those recommendations, or even just one, it doesn't need to be over the top, where that recommendation, which is social proof, by the way, to go on your CV. Yeah, just a thought.
Well,
so
I used to have a bunch of them, but then my resume was like 4 pages.
Yeah, you've got to have a balance to it. I totally agree. I don't think you need to have a bunch of it. You could have one. This is the way that I do it, is I have one, and then I say for further, like 6 plus, or how many you've got. I mean, some people have got 35 plus, yeah? Please refer to my LinkedIn profile. And there's a URL that just diverts people to that LinkedIn profile. So that's another way, again, that you can be kind of showcasing. It's not just me that's saying I'm good. I've got other people that are saying I'm good as well. So that can be quite a clever move to make. So if you look at the professional summary on this CV, there's not one word that means anything. Not one word. There's no proof. Not one. And that's what people are doing. They're creating summary sections like that. Yeah? Can everybody see that screen, by the way? Yeah?
Yeah, it is truly awful.
Yeah, so really, another thing that I see people making is that with the work history, they tell me what they've done, but you don't get hired for what you get done, by the way. You get hired for the result that you do.
Yeah, just on that one, she's going chronologically down. I normally would have the most recent experience at the top.
I would as well. I wouldn't do that. I would start with the most recent. Why would you do it that way? I'd never got that in ever. No, you start with the most recent, unless, there's some occasions where you might not, but there's not many. For 99.9% of people, you would start with the most recent, because that's normally where you've got that higher level job, and it's easier to get to that next position for what you're looking for. Yeah. Another thing is that, if you've got a degree, for example, then you don't need to be mentioning, the GCSEs that you've got, because it's obvious, yeah, that you must have those qualifications if you've got a degree. So sometimes that's taking up too much room as well. That doesn't need to be taken. So look, let's just recap, yeah, that, you know, that if you really are truly wanting to create, you know, a well thought out CV, then ultimately, you know, you need to be looking at the job descriptions, yeah, finding a common theme about what they're asking for. You know, don't make the mistake of sending out a generic CV. Every time that you send out a CV, it does need to be tailored to the role that you're going for. And I hear what people say. They say to me, God, that's going to take me forever, you know, if I've got to spend that amount of time. But if I was doing this for you, it would take you 20 minutes per CV that you were going to send out, not like the rest of the day or half a day to make those changes. And you need to be thinking about how can you join up your CV with your LinkedIn profile as well. Those two things ultimately need to be working together. And it's not just a case of just sticking the URL of LinkedIn. I tell you what, that's just, I see people do this, but you've got to tell people why you want them to go there. Okay, no problem, I can totally understand. So you need to be thinking in terms of that way, yeah? And if you start re-engineering the process, looking at what they want and doing this, and another cheats way that you could do this as well, and this is what I also help people to do, is you know, if your issue is that you are getting stuck, you know, in HR, your CV goes to and gets stuck at HR and it doesn't go any further and you still don't get any results, then there is a way that you can stop that, by the way. And I call that the show and tell letter. So again, I'm saying to you that the way that I work is very different from your typical career coach. I'm saying to you that you kind of need to think, you know, differently. So the job of the CV is to get you more interviews or get you to a coffee stage. And if that means that we have to skip HR and go direct to your hiring manager, then guess what? That's exactly what we need to do. So one of the things that I help people to do as well is that I give you a guide, you know, which shows you, okay, this is what I would be doing. Here's like 3 examples of a show and tell letter, which would also go with that creative CV template that I would have done for you as well. Okay, but I'm hoping that's been useful. We've went over, they're only meant to be 20 minutes, so I'm glad that we've gone through a few things. But is anybody hitting that problem where HR is an issue? Sean, Carlos, anybody hitting that problem?
No, I to be honest, I tend to be quite naughty and just try and bypass them and go and do some research and find out who the hiring manager is likely to be, and try just getting in through other routes. I mean, to be honest, if I'm on the receiving end of that, it can sometimes irritate me.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a bit of a balance that you have to.
Yeah, it depends on how you do it. So if I was creating a show and tell letter,
yeah,
it is very. Do you know what? We actually praise the person. The first thing that we're doing is we look at how can we praise that individual. Why? Because we don't want to get on the wrong end of them.
yeah, quite, yeah. And you also don't want them to just bounce you straight to HR and then, you know,
that's it. That's what you want to avoid. You don't want to get bounced back. Yeah. So what we try and do, or what we do is the first part of the letter is actually to do with some form of praise. And the reason why we do that is because, let's be honest, how many times do you get told, wow, you're doing a great job? Yeah. Not often. So when you get there needs to be more. So when you do get something, you stand out. Okay.
Yeah.
So Sean, it sounds like you're sorted. What do you see as your issue then?
I'm right, to be honest, it's just general interest. We talked a long time ago about some coaching. I mean, it's got to be 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm in a great job and really enjoying myself at the minute. However, who knows what's going to happen on the other side of this? So
I know. The mind boggles. Yeah, the mind boggles. What about you, Steve?
I've always found it best in skipping HR. The most effective it's ever been is going straight to the people as the head of the department you want to join.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. So that's where, the creative CV, you attach that with that cover letter. I call it the show and tell letter because it's not your typical cover letter. But I think Sean's right. It's how do you balance that where you're not irritating them and they're not just simply getting banged back, to bounce back to HR. So yeah, I totally agree with that, with what you're saying.
I have another question for you.
Yeah.
You've said that you should tailor the CV to a specific job.
Mm-hmm.
If you're approaching a company, effectively just to sell yourself, where you don't know that there's a specific job,
mm-hmm.
would you just use a letter, or would you try and do a generalised CV with it?
You could use a letter, but you could use a CV because I would imagine that the job that you're going for is probably similar to what you've been doing. Yeah. Unless or is it not?
Not necessarily in my case. I can do multiple things. So.
Okay. Interesting. So how widely different is it?
Well, if you imagine anything in IT, I've got 47 years experience in IT doing everything. So
right. Okay.
You did everything. So.
Right, and it's hard, I suppose, with IT to work out what's the big thing that they're wanting help. Is that the way that you're seeing it?
That's exactly right. You don't know where their issue or pain points are.
Where the pain points are.
If you knew what the pain point was, like I say, I can help. So that's effectively what I problem solve. So if they've got an issue, I can fix it for them.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make a comment there?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So one of the things that I tend to do is I'll go and research the company as best as I can, and it is amazing how many things you see. So if you go in and you see that they mention they use Microsoft Access, okay, I've got an in there. And just you will be staggered with a little bit of research, or even going into LinkedIn and looking at people that work there and looking at the skills that they've got, just to start to paint a picture for what it looks like.
It's really good advice. Yeah. Go in, and then you might even you could just from there you've got something, and then sometimes with LinkedIn it says actually somebody in your network is connected to.
Yeah.
It's anything like the company I work for now. They hide everything. They don't tell anybody what their issues are. Obviously, internally, you can see everything.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. Then it might be a case that you see if you are connected or someone that you know, and see if you can get an introduction and just say, hey, I'm looking at this, but it would be great if you can just I'm trying to write a letter or provide a CV, but in order for me to do that, it'd be good to have some idea of the pain points, the things that you're looking to solve.
See if you can find somebody that's already there that you know or are connected to.
Yeah. That could be definitely one way through the door, or it's your best guess. Yeah. So, at the moment, particularly with IT and with the way things are at this moment in time, I would imagine survival. Yeah, for a lot of firms, or looking to cut costs or becoming more efficient.
Exactly right.
Yeah, all those, it depends on how big the organisation is, but the license fees, looking at, just the day-to-day operations, can certain things be done better that cost less? Yeah.
I think that, so I lead an IT function.
Right.
And what I've been focusing on of late is enabling the business to work remotely.
There you go.
But there was a really fascinating one earlier that said, who led your digital transformation? Was it the CEO? Was it the CIO? Or was it COVID-19?
That's brilliant.
And actually, it has. And so the things that have, and we've been doing lots of work, but the thing that people have responded to most is how we've now enabled them to operate remotely.
Yeah.
To put some better workflows in place and effectively allow our business to operate with.
There you go. That's great advice.
So if you're looking at, if you've got skills in doing that, that's definitely something I would suspect lots of businesses have struggled with and would be quite receptive to hearing about how you could help them with.
That's brilliant. Well, this was really fun. So,
Yeah, it's good.
yeah. So hopefully I see you guys next week. If not, you know, there is the week after and week after.
Definitely. So where are you now, Susan?
I'm actually in Germany.
I'm in the Midlands in Coventry.
Are you, Steve? Okay, yeah, I'm in Telford. So.
Oh, right, fantastic. Well, it's always good to hear.
Yeah. Yes, well, yeah, enjoy Germany. You said you were in the States as well for a while. Was that right?
Yeah, well, I was just, no, it was more kind of like holiday type thing. God, I'm so glad. I wasn't going to say anything before, but I'm so bloody glad that I don't live in the US.
Oh, God, well, I'm terrified. Both my boys live over there.
I'm not surprised you're terrified because, Jesus Christ, they've got a moron. I've got to stop.
Turn record off, but yeah, good. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I must stop.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's going on over there. They